And I will admit everyone.
Okay, is everybody checked in? I want to say good evening, afternoon, everybody. This is an exciting evening. Welcome to another Grand Rounds on the Montgomery Heart and Wellness Community. We have a very special guest today. A lady I've been talking, we've been, when did we meet? In 2013 or 20? It's sometime around then. Anyway, I met Chef AJ a number of years ago. I won't say how many, we're gonna age both of us. But without further ado, Chef AJ has been devoted to a plant-exclusive diet for over 45 years. She was the host of television series Healthy Living with Chef AJ, which aired on Foodie TV. A chef, culinary instructor, and professional speaker, she's the author of 3 best-selling books, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, A Revolutionary Approach to Conquer Cravings, Overcome Food Addiction, and Lose Weight Without Going Hungry. Own Your Health, in the 10th anniversary edition of Unprocessed, all which have received glowing endorsements by many luminaries in the plant-based movement. Chef AJ was the executive pastry chef at Satiety restaurant in Los Angeles, where she was famous for her vegan sugar, oil, salt, and gluten-free desserts, which use the fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the whole fruit. She broadcasts Chef AJ Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter daily. She is the creator of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, which has helped hundreds of people achieve the health and body that they deserve, and is proud to say that her IQ is higher than her cholesterol. In 2018, she was inducted into the Vegetarian Hall of Fame. I present to you Chef AJ. And one thing, it's not in that bio, is Chef AJ is one heck of a stand-up comic. And so she is very, very delightful to listen to. I enjoy visiting with Chef AJ. She has been very helpful to us and our cause here at Montgomery Heart and Wellness. She's actually connected us with many of the top-notch vegan people over the years, and I apologize for that. Put my phone on vibrate. And it's just been a thrill and pleasure to work with Chef AJ. She's one of the stalwarts in the plant-based community, and I like the way she states that plant-exclusive diet. And I'm going to start using that. I don't see a trademark by that, so I may start using trademarking myself.
That's okay. You know what happened, and thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I can't promise I'll be this funny tonight because of the topic, but I like this pin that somebody gave me.
What does it read? I can't see it.
Old vegan. I'm the old vegan. 45. Yeah, my 45th anniversary is September 1st, so it's just a few weeks away. But wow. I love Dr. Colin Campbell and his work, but I never resonated with the word plant-based diet, plant forward, plant predominant, because plant-based, you could have 51% of your calories from plants and 49% from McDonald's. So that's why I like to say plant exclusive.
Now that's excellent. It's very clever, and I think it's very insightful. And I think the rest of us need to follow your lead in that regard, because plant exclusive, in fact, we were having that conversation maybe not too long ago in my office, and what's plant-based? Well, somebody says that, somebody says that. But plant exclusive, it leaves no doubt that it's exclusively plants. And so I like that. So we're going to start using that in the optimal health journey. So I understand you have a presentation for us today, Chef AJ.
I do. And I'm so excited to give it because it's one of my favorite ones. So let me just share my screen. And then we go like that. And then wait, we got to change the view to slideshow. Okay, you can see my slides now.
I see them, and they're beautiful. Yes,
oh,
yes.
Thank you.
And I love that opening slide. And the way this is kind of informal. The guests will be quiet, and I'll be mostly quiet. I may ask a question here and there, and I'm taking notes, and so. Anyway, but go ahead and take over the show.
And you're more, and honestly, if it really, since this is a small group, if somebody really has a burning question, like while I'm on a slide, I don't mind if you just say, hey, wait, I didn't understand that, or, because I can look at the chat, or you can unmute yourself. So anyway, I'm just curious, has anybody in this group ever wanted to lose weight ever? Okay, good. I see a couple hands, or maybe somebody that wants to lose weight if it's not you. You would think now it's 70% of Americans overweight or obese, but I've given this talk to like 300 physicians once at Kaiser, and even if you don't want to lose weight or need to lose weight, the way that I'm going to propose that a person would eat for what I call ultimate weight loss is really the same way I'm pretty sure Dr. Montgomery tells his patients to eat, and pretty much all the doctors that I've worked with or for tell their patients to eat for really ultimate health and disease prevention and disease reversal. And what I call this, oops, how do I do that? Next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, got to use the mouse. I call this the secrets to ultimate weight loss. So just a little bit about myself. I used to be obese, actually. I think the only time I was at my ideal weight was when I was born. And I really became fat at the age of 5. And, I was born in 1960, and there weren't a lot of overweight or obese kids in the 60s. There was really like one in every class of 40. And that was me really all through college. And, people, it's so funny how perspectives and times have changed, because the picture on the left, I weighed close to 200 pounds. I'm 5'6". I'm actually 5'5" now. I was in an accident and I lost one vertebra, but ostensibly I'm meant to be 5'6". And, when people say, oh, you weren't that fat on the left, and it's like, well, how fat was I supposed to be? Because that, I don't mean to be mean, but the thing is when I weighed 180 at 5'6", that's obese, right? But the point is I'm not that anymore. But the truth is it took me over 50 years of my life to figure out how to do this. At the age of 11, I weighed 165 pounds and I was not yet 5 feet tall, because I hadn't learned the secrets I'm going to share with you today. So this is basically the same dress, but completely different sizes. It's funny, the picture on the left was taken when I was 43 years old, and I was only about 165 then. I'm wearing a brown shirt. I'm standing next to a brown cow. The cow is 800 pounds. The cow's the one on the left, just in case you can't differentiate. But the one on the right was taken in 2003. 2003. I'm so bad at math. It was taken 10 years later, 2013, and about 127 pounds. And now I'm about 10 pounds lighter. But the thing is I'm not doing this to brag, but once I learned how to do this, and I really learned most of this from the True North Health Center, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, Dr. Doug Lyle, the authors of The Pleasure Trap, it really became quite easy. Because the truth is, I can distill the secrets to weight loss into 2 words. And a lot of people think those words are eat less or exercise more. And in some parts of the country, they think the secret is gastric bypass. But the truth is, the secret to ultimate weight loss is calorie density. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the term calorie density, because it's different than counting calories. When you understand calorie density, you don't have to weigh and measure your food, count calories, carbs, or points, or figure out how many calories in a half a cup of rice or a cup of blueberries. You simply have to know what's known as the average calorie density of a few different food groups. And what calorie density simply means are the calories per pound of food. In the United States, we use pounds. Other countries probably use liters, but people think, well, but I don't eat a pound of food. Well, you actually do. The person that has done the most research on this, she's a lovely person. I've had the privilege of interviewing, I think, 3 times now, and her name is Dr. Barbara Rolls. And she conducts research at her laboratory at Penn State University, where she studies human eating behavior. And one of the things Dr. Rolls discovered is that human beings consistently eat the same amount of food per day by weight. Now, that doesn't mean that I eat the same amount as, say, a 250-pound linebacker, but that we consistently need a certain volume, a certain weight of food in order to feel full. And that regardless of our age, we eat this amount consistently. And for most people, that is about 3 to 5 pounds of food. When you really get into understanding calorie density, you'll realize that people aren't overweight because they ate too much food. It's because they eat too many calories, because they're eating foods at too high of a caloric density that our species wasn't designed for. Food varies in calorie density on the low end to about 100 calories per pound, on the high end to 4,000 calories per pound. And so there's a 40-fold difference in the caloric densities of food. And when you understand this, simply by changing the type of food you eat, you can lower your calorie density of your overall diet. And so in other words, you actually can eat more in terms of volume, eat more food and actually weigh much less. And if you're somebody that is what I call a volume eater like me, that likes to eat large quantities of food to feel full and satisfied, I think you're going to really like this approach. So as I mentioned, Dr. Rolls, she's wrote a series of best-selling books called Volumetrics, and these are always voted when the U.S. News and World Report decide the best dietary style. Let me tell you, keto is like last, or it doesn't make the list. She's always number one or number two, right out there with the Ornish diet. And because the thing is you can understand how you can feel full on fewer calories. You know, I always joke that the first three letters of the word diet is die, because when you go on a diet, you want to die because you're eating less food. And that's not natural. When you eat under the hunger drive, you're going to get hungry. And that's why so many people who lose weight through a great deal of suffering and effort end up not only gaining that weight back, but more, because you can't eat under the hunger drive very long. Willpower is a very short-lived commodity. You may be able to do it for a few weeks or a few months if your daughter's getting married or if you're going to a high school reunion. But the way I'm going to propose you eat is you're going to get to eat either the same amount of food you're eating now or more and feel full and satisfied, but take in fewer calories. And the reason Dr. Rolls' work resonated with me is because I'm a visual learner. And we're going to have a lot of slides in the end of the presentation where I show you different types of food and how much you get for one and the other. When I saw the pictures in her book, like on the cover, for example, she illustrates that you could have this huge bowl of minestrone soup for the same amount of calories. It's a very small piece of a cheeseburger. What's going to fill you up more? Or in her book, I learned, for example, that for the same amount of calories as a mere quarter cup of raisins, I could have 2 cups of grapes. And that's what really got me thinking, you know. The thing that's really interesting about Dr. Rolls' work, because she's done so many different studies on this, is that she just determined that not only do we consistently eat the same amount of food per day by weight, but that we have these things in our digestive tracts called stretch receptors. And if we want to feel full, we have to activate them with a certain volume of food. And, you know, of course, you can lose weight. You know, you could eat probably, you know, a Snickers bar, a couple Snickers bars every day, and you could probably be under your caloric needs and lose weight, but you're not going to feel full. And when you don't feel full, you know, you dysregulate your hunger hormones of leptin and ghrelin, you get more hungry. Losing weight in this way, which is slow and steady, is really, in my opinion, the easiest and the most delicious and also the most sustainable. So what we're going to do is together, we're going to create a calorie density chart. And when I did this, I should have made the purple yellow, would have made more sense. But because purple's my favorite color, I decided to make it purple. So green means go, like on a stoplight. And these are the foods that are the healthiest foods on the planet. And coincidentally, the most favorable for weight loss. The foods in red, in my opinion, well, they're the most calorically dense, but they're also the most unhealthy. The foods in purple, now these are very healthy foods. They just happen to be calorically dense. And so they're not so great for weight loss. Now, remember I mentioned that food ranges in caloric density from 100 calories per pound to 4,000 calories per pound. So the food, and again, these are not individual foods. So you don't have to memorize, you know, every little food out there. It's about knowing just a few food groups. So the food group that is lowest in calorie density, which is about 100 calories per pound on average, and you might even have some guesses in your own mind, you know, what you think it might be. Well, these are non-starchy vegetables. So non-starchy vegetables are pretty much any vegetable that you can think of. Corn actually is a starch. It's a grain technically. And, you know, parsnips is a starchy vegetable. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, these are starches. But non-starchy vegetable is pretty much any vegetable you could think of in the whole world. If you were to Google non-starchy vegetables, you might get a picture like this. And the thing is when you look at this photo, there are some things in this photo that are actually lower than 100 calories per pound. So for example, tomatoes, cucumber, zucchini, eggplant, okra, and red bell pepper, these are culinarily fruits, but well, culinarily we call them culinary vegetables, but they're actually fruit. These are 67 calories per pound. If you Google a list of non-starchy vegetables, you might come up with a list like this. So you could ostensibly eat a different one every day without actually even repeating. Now, Conan O'Brien has said that for the first time since 2007, the FDA has approved a new device to treat obesity. This amazing breakthrough is called a vegetable. And the truth is that the more vegetables you eat, the leaner you'll be. I mean, assuming you're not pouring butter and cheese and bacon and things like that on them. You know, they did a study at Tufts University, and they found that the people that ate the most servings of fruits and vegetables had the lowest body weight and BMI consistently. And if you look to cultures around the world that are not as obese as Americans, at least not yet, you know, if you think about the Asian culture, I mean, they eat white rice is their primary starch. They might have a little oil and animal products, but they have like only a 3% obesity rate. And I think that might be partly due to the fact that they are a culture that eats a lot of vegetables. You know, Americans, a lot of us grew up either not eating vegetables, hating vegetables. I know that myself personally, I really didn't eat any fruits and vegetables till I was 43 years old. And I was a vegan for 26 of those years. That is how I got to be close to 200 pounds with the beginning of colon cancer from eating a junk food vegan diet. A lot of people don't eat vegetables because they don't like them. But the truth is, what you eat today, you will crave tomorrow. So the more that you eat vegetables, the more you will like them, eventually learn to love them, especially when you see what they do to give you the health and the body that you desire. And there are ways to actually make them quite delicious, which I can talk about if you like. I can do it now or later, but using things like your air fryer, for example, or delicious sauces that are oil-free, like reduced balsamic vinegars. There's ways to make vegetables taste really, really delicious. The only problem is if you eat too many vegetables, your doctor will tell you, take a hike because they can't find anything wrong with you. You know, I love how Dr. Furman says, if you don't like vegetables, you better live close to a hospital because they also are the foods that are highest in nutrient density. And you know, I just can't say enough good things about vegetables where health and weight are concerned. The problem is most people don't like them. And we're going to find out a little bit later on why people don't like vegetables as much as they like some of the other foods of a high caloric density. But I want you to know that wherever you are in your journey to optimal health and wellness, I didn't eat a single fruit and vegetable till I was 43, got very fat, got very sick. But now that is what my diet is composed of. I enjoy it. I love it because, again, what you eat today, you will crave tomorrow. So I always tell people, regardless of whatever you eat, even if you go to McDonald's, have vegetables first. You know, what's really interesting, and when I wrote my book, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, I wrote about this, and I even have a footnote on it, but it wasn't until Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Diet, came out where he actually, you know, told people about this, is vegetables like the cruciferous vegetables, like the kales, the collard, the broccoli, they have a compound in them called thylakoids. And if we could get them in a pill, I mean, they would charge a lot of money for them because what thylakoids do is they actually block fat absorption. It's like they turn off the hunger switch and help you fight cravings for things like sugar. And so I always recommend people, especially if they're trying to lose weight, if they're trying to combat their food addiction, not only have vegetables at every meal, including breakfast, making sure at least half your plate is vegetables, but get those greens in. Let greens be thy medicine, because that is what's going to blunt your cravings for all the unhealthy stuff. You may not like it at first, as I said, but the more you do it, the more you'll like it. And then when you don't have vegetables at every meal, you're going to actually miss them very much. You know, somebody posted this once on my Facebook page, no one ever has gotten fat from eating too much kale. And while I would prefer, I know that Dr. Montgomery does smoothies, and I'm not an objection to that, but we're going to talk a little bit about the difference in caloric density when you eat your food whole versus when you juice and blend it. But there's always going to be therapeutic uses for greens, like in juices and smoothies. You know, when you think about it, you would probably burn more calories in the chewing and absorbing of the vegetables than you would in the vegetables, because vegetables and fruits too, they're mostly water. Of course, they have fiber and vitamins and minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients, but they're basically free. And by that, I mean, even dietary plans that I don't agree with, like Weight Watchers and some of the others, every dietary style out there, with the exception of maybe the carnivore diet, which is just meat, everyone says we need to eat vegetables. We need to eat more vegetables, and especially we need to eat green vegetables. I'm telling you, the biggest secret I can share with you for weight loss, for health, is to eat more vegetables. And whatever you're eating now, even if you think you're eating a lot, you probably need to double it, maybe triple or quadruple it. But that is the secret. And really, I can't say enough about vegetables. But you can't just eat vegetables because you'd be really hungry because they're too low in calorie density. So let's move up the chart. And the next group, and again, we always average because some are less, some are more, 300 calories per pound would be fruit. Now, remember I mentioned 6 fruits that were culinary vegetables that were actually only 67 calories per pound. Most fruit is about 200 calories per pound, apples, berries, pears, those kind of things. But some of the fruits, pineapples, bananas, they're a little bit higher, 400. So we're averaging it at 300 calories per pound. But the truth is if all you ate was fruits and vegetables, there's no way you could be overweight. There is a group of people out there. You may have heard of some of the doctors like Dr. Doug Graham. They follow what's called an 80-10-10 diet. Now, I'm not saying for you to do that because I know personally for me, if I don't have a little starch in my diet, I get quite hungry, but you can do it. You can do it healthfully. But people that only eat fruits and vegetables, they're never overweight. You can't eat at a caloric density that low. Do you know how many pounds of food you'd have to eat? I mean, think about it. I mentioned that most people eat about 3 to 5 pounds of food per day. Let's just say you weighed 150 pounds, because I'm bad at math. We need a nice even number like that. Just to breathe your heart and beat your lungs, your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate would be about 10 calories per pound of body weight, assuming you're not doing anything. So you need at least like 1,500 calories if you weigh 150 pounds. Yeah, I'm sure you can't eat 15 pounds of vegetables. It'd be pretty hard to eat 5 pounds of fruit. So the thing is with fruits and vegetables, you really have the keys to the kingdom there because you really can eat them, what we call ad libitum, as much as you want, as often as you want, whenever you want, because these are the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. And here's just a picture of fruit. As I mentioned, until I was 43, I thought Skittles were a fruit because that was the closest I ever got to tasting the rainbow. And I remember oh God, I never, when people would serve fruit for dessert, I'd be like, are you kidding me? Fruit's not dessert. And then if I had to eat it grudgingly, I'd pour the sugar all over it, But now sometimes when I eat fruit, I'm like, this is so sweet. It's ridiculous how sweet fruit is when you're off of sugar. And I'm proud to say that next July 6th, it'll be 20 years sugar-free for me. So I'm going to be celebrating it. Thank you at Rancho La Puerta, a spa in Mexico that I teach, probably with Dr. Doug Lyle. And we're going to have a big party there, a big sugar-free party. So I'm telling you, wonderful things happen when you get off that drug, because it is a drug. It's not a food, it's a drug. So here's the thing about juicing and blending. And again, it's not that I'm telling you never to have a smoothie, but I'm working with a lot of people that are really looking for weight loss. And in general, liquid calories are not as favorable for weight loss because it's easier to overconsume them than in the same amount you would of the whole food. I'm much more a fan of smoothies than juices, by the way, unless it's green juice. And I do drink a little bit of green juice every day. But let's take a look at juicing, for example. So these vials are the exact same size. Our stomach is about the size of a cantaloupe. It holds about a liter of food, which is about 4.22 cups. Now, apples are 200 calories per pound. So I weighed out 500 calories worth of apples on the scale at the store, and it was about 6 apples. Well, I juiced those apples, and I got this much apple juice. I think it was like 3 cups maybe. Now, what do you think is missing from the apple juice that the apple had? If you thought fiber, you'd be right. So the pulp and the fiber have been removed. And so what happens then is when you drink the apple juice, it raises your blood sugar much more quickly because it's not mitigated by the fiber. When your blood sugar goes up quickly, your insulin goes up quickly. Insulin is the hormone responsible for driving fat into the cells. So it's better to eat your food not just from a plant, but from a whole plant with the fiber and the water intact. And the reason is because this is after vegetables. The second secret to ultimate weight loss is to make sure that everything you eat has the fiber and the water together, because fiber and water together create what's known as bulk. And bulk, like that feeling, like if you imagine taking a dried out sponge, putting it in water, and now it expands. Bulk is what creates satiety, that feeling of fullness that tells you I've had enough, I want to stop eating. Because remember, we do have these stretch receptors that line our digestive tract. We also have nutrient receptors. We also have calorie receptors. But in order to activate those stretch receptors, it's a lot easier to do when you're doing it with food that hasn't been pureed. Also, satiety also begins in the eyes. So when you see a larger volume of food, like in this case, the apples, and chewing also increases satiety, it does make you feel fuller than if you're drinking just a liquid. Okay, so now on the right, we have applesauce. And like, we could also pretend this was like a smoothie, because let me explain something to you. So when I went to the True North Health Center about 11 years ago, I was about 50 pounds heavier. And I thought I was doing pretty good because I had finally got off of Coke Slurpees after 43 years, which is what I was having for breakfast every day with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup and a Dr. Pepper Big Gulp for lunch. And I was having a green smoothie every day for breakfast. And it was pretty healthy. I mean, it was like a half a pound of spinach or kale and a cup of almond milk, a frozen banana, cup of blueberries, some flax seeds. It was maybe 400 calories. It was certainly very healthy and much better than the Coke Slurpee, but I couldn't seem to lose any weight. And I asked Dr. Lyle, he's a prominent psychologist, that he's a big fan of Dr. Montgomery. Actually, I hear him talk about you quite a bit. And he said, I want you to do an experiment. He said, when you get home from True North, I want you to put all the ingredients for your green smoothie in your blender. But instead of pressing blend, I want you to dump it in a bowl and eat it. And guess what happens when I tried to eat it? I got full before I finished. So what happens is blenders, for people that need hypernourishment, like kids or people like, you know, that can't chew, or maybe older people, this could be a good thing to blend. But for people, regular people just trying to lose weight, calories still do matter. And so what the blender does is it artificially reduces the volume so that you can actually consume more than you would if it was in its whole food form. Now, applesauce in this case, you know, it's still way better than the juice. It's a fruit puree, but it still will raise the blood sugar more than the whole apple. And again, anytime your blood sugar is raised quickly, your insulin is raised more quickly, and that's responsible for driving fat into the cells. Dr. Lyle, I believe, said that when you blend your food, it's about 12.5% more calorically dense than if you were to eat it whole. So it's not a big deal, especially if you're starting out. But if you're somebody that like, hey, you know, I got 10 pounds, I can't get it off, think about having your food whole rather than having it juiced or blended. So what about dried fruit or dehydrated fruit? So these are apple rings, and I have a machine that's actually running right now. Oh, you would love this, Dr. Montgomery. I'm making a raw granola. Well, I guess it's not raw because I'm using oats, but I'm making basically a raw granola in the other room, and it's made out of carrots and apples and raisins and bananas, and it's quite delicious.
Give me the recipe.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm testing recipes for my new book. It's a dessert cookbook. So actually I can get it. Let me write myself a note, get it to you right after the class. Okay. I think you'd like it. It does have oats. So oats aren't technically raw, but it's very good. Anyway, so dried fruit, it's not that I completely avoid dried fruit, but it's much more calorically dense than whole food. So for example, these 6 apples, when I cut them on the sharp blade of my mandolin and put them in my food dehydrator, look at the volume now. It's like about a cup. And it's so much easier to eat and overeat dried fruit. You know, you probably wouldn't eat like 10 whole apricots, but it would be pretty easy to eat 10 dried apricots. You see, apples are only about 200 calories per pound, but the apple rings are 1,300 calories per pound because you see, we remove the water. So in the case of the apple juice, we remove the fiber, which made it more calorically dense. Fiber has very few calories. It's almost no calories. I think it's like 1 calorie per gram, but you don't absorb the calories in the fiber. And the thing about fiber fiber is your friend. And when you think about the fact that most Americans eat 92% of their calories from animal products or processed food, they're not eating any fiber. There is no fiber in any animal product. And there is no fiber in processed food unless the manufacturer added it back in. So fiber, it like puts the brakes on it. It's what allows you to stop eating and still feel full and comfortable. Fiber is important to every bodily process. It helps flush out toxins. It binds to cholesterol and other waste material. But where weight loss is concerned, fiber, it's as if it tricks the brain into feeling full on fewer calories. And so the whole apple rings, well, they still have the fiber, but the water's taken out. The juice still has the water, but the fiber's taken out. The applesauce or the smoothie has the water and fiber intact, but the bulk has been reduced. So again, for optimal weight loss, you want to have your whole food eaten whole. And so if you imagine these were your stomachs and you look at the 4 incarnations of apples, sauce, juice, or dried, I think you could see that you're going to feel fuller on the whole apple. And honestly, I don't know many people that could eat 6 apples in one sitting, but you probably could easily eat that same amount of dried apples, drink that apple sauce, or eat the applesauce or drink the apple juice. Okay, so next category, and again, these are categories of food. We're not even going into specific foods because you really don't need to. 400 to 600 calories a pound is my favorite calorie of food. And this is what Dr. John McDougall would call the starch. So the unrefined complex carbohydrates. Carbs get a bad name. People say carbs aren't good for you. Well, if they come from sugar and flour and alcohol, they're not good for you. But if they are eaten the way they're found in nature, they are the healthiest foods on the planet that our ancestors ate for and most of human history to survive. And this is where most people get the bulk of their calories, at least people that are eating in the plant exclusive world in the healthful manner. So different types of starches would be potatoes or sweet potatoes. These are about 365 to 400 calories per pound. Whole grains, whether they contain gluten or not, these could be things like quinoa, teff, millet, amaranth, rice, oats, corn, sorghum, things like that. These are about 500 calories per pound. And legumes, beans, split peas, lentils, these are about 550 to 600 calories per pound. Now, the thing about whole grains and legumes is they're cooked in water. And so anytime something is cooked in water, you're going to lower the overall caloric density. So to give you an example, a lot of people eat what's called muesli, and there's nothing unhealthy about it. People will take rolled oats, which is the 3rd incarnation of the oat, after the oat groat, then the steel cut oat, then the rolled oat, which has been flattened and steamed. And they might have a splash of almond milk on it. And it's not that it's unhealthy, but when you eat it that way, it's about 1,800 calories per pound. But when you cook it in water, it now goes down to about 375 calories per pound. So if you want to think about water cooking methods in your food, that's why soup is such a wonderful thing for weight loss, either to have it as your meal or to have it as a starter course, because it's the water in the food, Dr. Rolls discovered, that's magic. It's like, so for example, she even did this study where she gave people a bunch of water. It didn't work that way. The water has to be bound to the food. So you can't be like having just all those apple rings and then drinking a bunch of water. It doesn't work that way. You want to have the food as found in nature. And so soup, things like, stews and chilies, things that have high water, fruits and vegetables, these are always going to be the most favorable for weight loss. Water by itself exits the digestive tract too quickly and doesn't fill you up. But something magical happens when water is in the food in its whole natural form, or in like a cooking method, like a soup, that just keeps you feeling full for longer. All right. Okay. So I wish I brought my bracelet. Okay, so I didn't always have PowerPoint. And for many years, I used to counsel people in person in my apartment in Sherman Oaks, and they'd come to me for weight loss. And I'd basically be giving them this lecture, like just one-on-one on a big whiteboard. And I had given the entire lecture, and her name was Margie, I believe. And afterwards, she quizzically scratched her head and she goes, well, what am I supposed to eat again? And out of frustration, I took my red marker and I said, just eat to the left of the red line. Well, as research corroborates, if you eat your calories, meaning keeping your average calorie density to 600 calories per pound or less, meaning mostly eating non-starchy vegetables, fruit, whole grains, legumes, most people can eat what's called ad libitum, as much as they want, as often as they want, whenever they want, until comfortably full. Not Thanksgiving, I'm going to throw up full, but until comfortably full. And most people eating this way will not only lose weight to very close to their ideal weight, but be able to maintain it easily. Now, why can't people do this? Because most people, as I said, are eating less than 10% of their calories to the left of the red line. Most people are eating the majority of their calories to the right of the red line. So now we're going to find out where those calories are coming from. All right, so the next food group is purple. So purple is healthy. It's just a little bit more calorie dense. Oops, before that, excuse me, I'm just going to show you an example of some of the foods that are eaten by me and my family that are left of the red line. This is actually a Thanksgiving spread, and we have some air fried potatoes. We have stuffed squash. Right here is a pie that's made out of sweet potatoes and bananas. So lots of delicious color. These look like M&Ms, but they're cherry tomatoes. These are roasted, what do they call it? Bell peppers. So you can have lots of delicious food. This is a bodacious beet salad. This is oven roasted ratatouille. These are stuffed mushrooms. So, I mean, the food to the left of the red line is delicious. These are my smoky sweet potato burgers. These are fantastic. These are, this is a millet salad that I make, and this is a cauliflower bisque. So these are just pictures I took from various cooking classes. Roasted Brussels sprouts with balsamic vinegar and Dijon glaze. These are carrot cake muffins, oven roasted ratatouille. So lots of delicious food. This is a restaurant, actually. When I lived in Los Angeles, it's still there. They're also in Washington, called Starches. It's an organic, fast, fresh Mexican grill. And they actually have a salad that I created for them. They do it as a bowl or a burrito. So restaurant food, depending on restaurants, I work with them. They don't put any oil in it. It's minimal salt. So you can get a meal. And this is pinto beans, or you could get black, over organic brown rice with steamed broccoli, a little bit of avocado and pico de gallo, and salad greens. And again, you can have a delicious left of the red line meal. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, these restaurants closed, but there used to be a chain of restaurants throughout the United States, either called Sweet Tomatoes or Soup Plantation. And it's heartbreaking because it's one of the best places to eat. They didn't make any money on me or my people, because you could keep going back for huge salads with all kinds of vegetables and beans and peas. I would bring my own dressing, but they do have balsamic vinegar there. They would have baked potatoes and baked sweet potatoes, which I filled with salsa and scallions and fruit for dessert. And again, delicious example of a hearty, filling, left of the red line meal. This was me on the holistic holiday at Sea Cruise. And to show you that the bigger my plate got, the smaller I got, because eating low calorie dense, high nutrient food, I could eat a lot more food, probably twice as much food as I ate when I was overweight or obese. And you can see I have a rice dish here. I have a salad here, and steamed vegetables. So again, salad, steam, starch, rinse and repeat. Salad, steam, starch, rinse and repeat. That is the secret. Okay, this was when I was visiting the McDougall program, and you can see that. I mean, I wasn't doing this for the presentation. This is what my plates of food look like. And it's so funny when I teach at these spas and they give calorie spa portions, and I have to get notes from the nurse to get more food. They just don't get it. They don't get it at all. All right. Okay, so 750 calories per pound. This is actually a fruit, but it behaves a little bit different than most of the high water fruit, and it's avocados. And there's nothing unhealthy about avocado. It is so much healthier than to get your fat from oil or animal products or coconut. It's a monounsaturated fat. It's very good for you. It just happens to be a little bit more calorically dense. Now, the California Avocado Commission, these are the people that grow the avocados, so ostensibly want you to buy them. Even they say that the serving size of an avocado is only 1/5 of a medium avocado. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never been able to take a luscious, ripe avocado, cut it into 5 segments, eat one, and put 4 back. If you can do that, well, then you don't need this presentation. But a lot of people I work with, when they have those luscious, higher fat, pleasure trappy foods, they have a hard time moderating them. So that's that. Now, the next category of food, again, this is a category, so there's different things in it. RCC, which stands for refined complex carbohydrates. These are the bad carbohydrates, and dairy. Now, what's interesting about dairy is it's both an animal product and a processed food. You really don't see dairy in nature. And I'm not talking about in the udder of the cow or in the breast milk of the species, but it really is a processed food. But I forgot to say, with avocados at 750, if you talk to Dr. Doug Lisle, he's an evolutionary psychologist. He's also a plant-based doctor. And he talks about how our species actually evolved at a calorie density of about 700 calories per pound, because you're going to see as we continue with this presentation that, with the exception of the foods that are in purple, many of these foods that you're going to see in red they didn't exist throughout most of human history. These are highly processed foods. So our species didn't evolve at a calorie density that high. And so, yes, it's true that our ancestors, they got into a little bit of honey. They got into a little bit of animal products. Remember, they didn't have really weapons. They didn't have ways to refrigerate animal products. So they ate the sick, the slow, the weak, the isolated, the injured. So they did have some, but their average calorie density was that. And, I find it so interesting because I interviewed a gentleman named Dr. Herman Poncer, who wrote a book called Burn. And he actually lived with the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, which is like the last living hunter-gatherer tribe. And while they certainly aren't vegan, they don't eat any processed food. They don't drink any milk. They don't use any oil, sugar, salt, flour, alcohol. And they're lean people. They're very lean people. Their calorie density is more consistent with what we ate throughout human history. So these refined complex carbohydrates and dairy go in this group. And I think of them like this, because I don't think sugar and flour are healthy foods. I mean, are there some people like my skinny husband or Doug Lyle that can eat them and, not be overweight? Yeah, but does that mean that they're healthy? So this is where I see all food addiction lie, is in the category of this, because here's what we have. We've got at 1,200 calories per pound, we've got ice cream. Doesn't matter if it's vegan ice cream. And about 1,500 calories per pound, we have bread. About 1,600 calories per pound, we have cheese, and 1,800 calories per pound, we have sugar. And again, the people that I work with that suffer from food addiction, it's always in this group, and alcohol too. That would be the other thing where the addiction is, because these are not natural foods, not in this form for sure. We'll start with the sugar. They say that most Americans eat over 150 pounds per sugar per person per year. And I haven't had any in 19 years. So somebody's probably eating my share. When you think about it, sugar beets are about 195 calories per pound. But sugar is about 9 times as calorically dense, because anytime you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor, because you're taking out the water, you're taking out the fiber, and you're basically left with the non-nutritive part. Sugar's been linked to every disease, from tooth decay to heart disease to cancer. Most people, whether they eat it or not, know it's not healthy. But you try to take bread or flour away from people, or pasta, and it's like, that's un-American. After all, we break bread with our loved ones. But here's the thing. I'm not saying you can never have another slice of bread. But the problem is, if you're trying to lose weight, bread is so much more calorically dense than the whole food from which it came. Remember I told you about your stomach being about the size of a cantaloupe. Well, if you were to fill your stomach with 500 calories of rice, brown rice, which actually I am probably going to do for dinner after here, at least that much, you would feel full. You'd activate your mechanisms of satiety, your stretch nutrient and calorie receptors. But you take this brown rice and you mill it into a flour to make a bread or a pastry. And you now need 1,500 calories to fill the same space in the tank. Because remember, you're artificially reducing the volume, you're stripping it of the fiber and the water. Well, bread, it's 3 times as calorically dense as the whole grain that it came from. When you take a whole grain, like one of the grains that bread would be made out of, and you cut it with a sharp blade, you now have a broken grain. And when you ingest the broken grain, it increases the absorption it's got an increased surface area now. So the absorption in your intestines is increased. So again, what happens is your blood sugar is raised more quickly, your insulin is raised more quickly, and insulin is what drives fat into the cells. And what's really interesting about bread, people don't realize there's usually more salt, more sodium in bread than even in potato chips, because the food manufacturers hide it in there where you can't even taste it. So I don't recommend bread for people that are struggling with their weight or food addiction. I don't recommend any flours, even pastas, even one ingredient pastas. I make pasta out of butternut squash noodles, out of hearts of palm noodles, out of zucchini noodles. It's called zoodles. Kohlrabi noodles. They sell them at Trader Joe's. So if you're struggling, you just have to realize that the caloric density of your diet is probably too high for your genes to lose weight. So dairy, we know, is addictive from the work of Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Colin Campbell. Dr. Barnard wrote The Cheese Trap and Your Body in Balance. Dairy is just very addictive because of a substance in there called casomorphine, caso pertaining to dairy, morphine, an opiate-like compound. The breast milk of a species was to basically put the baby to sleep. So think about it, in nature, you didn't want your baby to wander, so you nursed them, and they basically knocked out. That's if you had a baby, you ever nurse him, you know that to be the case. Well, I don't think nature ever intended us, first of all, to drink milk of another species. And if we did, to concentrate it so much in dairy products like cheese, yogurt, and ice cream. But dairy is very addictive. I've had people tell me it's harder to quit cheese than it is to quit smoking. But even if it were healthy, the problem is it's too calorically dense. It's 1,600 calories per pound. Okay, so we have the breakdown of the foods we just mentioned. And I mentioned that these are the foods that are very calorically dense. They're highly processed, not found in nature. And these are the foods that most people that struggle with weight and food addiction struggle with. I don't have a lot of people telling me they have to attend Arugula Anonymous meetings because they can't stop eating arugula. But bread and flour and chips, actually chips are even higher. Yeah, chips are about 1,800 calories per pound. Those processed foods are the ones that really hook you. And that's why they say, bet you can't eat just one. Once you pop, you just can't stop. Oh, I thought I did this slide already. Wait, why isn't it? Ah, there we go. So I'm just going to show you some jar comparisons. And these jars hold about 4 cups. So I can't even get 500 calories of potatoes in this jar, but look what 500 calories of cheese looks like. And remember, if you want to lose weight and you want to not suffer, if you want to feel full, you're not going to be able to do it eating animal products and processed food because look, your stomach is always going to be empty. So this is what 500 calories of sugar looks like versus not even 500 calories of potatoes. That's maple syrup, actually. This is oat flour. So, I mean, look at it, doesn't even fill you up, but it does fill you out. So just think of this category of food like that. Don't eat it. Don't feed it to your children or your loved ones, and you will have much better health and much better weight control. And I used to sell these magnets, but nobody has a refrigerator anymore that can have a magnet stick to it. And I tell people, don't even think about it. All right. 2,500 calories per pound. Okay, so this food is the most craved food. Whenever they ask people, what do they crave the most? A lot of people think it's pizza. Pizza is actually number 2, which interestingly enough, pizza is considered a vegetable by Congress now because of the tomato sauce. French fries are considered a vegetable because of the ketchup, even though the ketchup has a ton of sugar and salt in it. But this generally tops the list of most craved foods by most people. And if you guessed chocolate, you would be correct. Well, you know, chocolate comes from something called a cacao bean. And a cacao bean, it actually was used as currency in the ancient Aztec civilization. And there are some health properties to chocolate. It's higher in antioxidants than red wine or green tea. But the problem is most people aren't just chewing on the cacao nib. Most people are making a mixture full of full fat dairy, lots of sugar to create this luscious product that we know as chocolate.
I'm sorry, what would the cacao nib fit on your scale if it's just the cacao nibs without the sugar?
Good question. let me ask Dr. Google right now. Hold on. How many calories in a pound of cacao nibs? And you know what? I can run to the kitchen because I have some, because there is a formula to calculate calorie density of foods where you divide the calories by the serving size in grams. But let's just see, because you're right. Okay. So there's, you know, when you think about it, 130 calories in 2 tablespoons, that is kind of high. 12 grams of fat, you know, it is. So we'd have to figure out the pound, but we could figure it out. So yeah.
Well, that's okay. We can come back to it. But I'm just curious without the sugar. But yeah, but it is a high fat food. The cacao nib itself is a high fat food.
Right. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, about the difference between high fat foods and foods that are not high in fat, at least when it comes to weight control, because having a food lower in fat allows you to have a food greater in volume. And we're going to see that in just a second. So, you know, they asked women which would they rather go a month without, sex or chocolate. And I'm sure every lady here knows the answer, and so does every man. But chocolate's a pretty powerful drug to most people. It's quite delicious. And, you know, when I give this talk in person to an audience, I'll say, you know, I've heard people say many years, Chef AJ, if I ate like you, I don't know if I would live longer. I think it would just seem like it. And so, because people say, oh, you know, everybody knows chocolate tastes better than kale. And I go, really? And they go, yeah. I go, well, do you want to bet me $100 that the reason you like chocolate better than kale is because it tastes better? And nobody's ever taken that bet. So this is my favorite part of the talk, because this is where we get into the brain. So They did an experiment with people that were self-professed chocoholics, and this was not about weight. It was just about this idea of people being chocoholics. And so they brought them into the research lab and they offered them free access to every kind of candy cake, cookie pie, or ice cream, whatever they said was their favorite. There was this buffet of chocolate. But before they unleashed them on the buffet, they gave them a shot of naloxone. So unless you're a doctor or a heroin addict, you might not know what naloxone is, but it's a drug that's used in the emergency room. So if somebody were to present with what could be a fatal heroin overdose, it blocks the blood-brain barrier so that that individual hopefully doesn't die from the overdose. Well, when the chocoholics were injected with naloxone, they walked up to the buffet, they looked for what their favorite chocolate was, they picked it up, they took a bite, and they put it down. And they had no more interest in eating chocolate. Now, did the chocolate cease to become delicious, rich tasting, or was something happening in the brain? Well, something's always happening in your brain. And what you need to know is, first of all, if you love sugar, fat, and salt, there's nothing wrong with you. Nature designed you that way. But you were meant to get it in its whole natural form from nature, not from these processed manufactured foods. So there is a neurotransmitter that's produced in the brain anytime you have a pleasurable experience, and this is called dopamine. So food releases dopamine, sex releases dopamine. This is for every species. Food and sex are generally the two most pleasurable experiences. Well, all eating, the eating of all food, stimulates the production of dopamine in your brain. However, the more calorically concentrated the calories, the more dopamine is released. So that's why you say you like things better. It's not necessarily because it tastes better, because I know people like Dr. Alan Goldhammer's son, Gar, who was never raised ever having bread or chocolate or maple syrup, and he gets just as much pleasure from Brussels sprouts. But the more calorically concentrated, the more dopamine is released. And so you get more pleasure for it. When you get more pleasure for it, what you say your experience is that it tastes better. Now, there's other ways to get dopamine naturally, there's sex. And I do believe doing things like volunteer work, it gives you those feel-good brain chemicals, exercise, for example. But a lot of people, especially people that have a lot of addictions, well, they produce less dopamine in their brain, or some people are born with what's called low D2 receptivity. They're not producing enough. So it's pretty normal, especially if you're stressed and things like that, that you crave these foods because you are looking for that hit of dopamine. And so that can take some time to get used to or neuroadapt to foods of a lower caloric density and get as much pleasure from that food as you're getting. And that's the thing. What people need to know is this can take some time, but it can happen. You can learn to appreciate the taste of whole natural food, get pleasure from it. That's why Dr. Goldhammer does water fasting at the True North Health Center, because when people go without food, and you refeed them, the first food you feed them is generally, after their juice, is steamed zucchini. People think they're eating a hot fudge sundae, because you can get used to these foods and they can become delicious, but it's really hard to have a foot in both worlds and have these foods to the left of the red line taste as delicious as they can while you're still dipping into some of these highly processed, high fat, high sugar, high calorie foods. All right, so the next group of foods, now these are very healthy. The thing is, I got one more jar, sorry. This is 500 calories of M&Ms with peanuts. You can see that's not very much food. So you can have a lot more potatoes for a lot less calories and no fat. That slides out of order. I got to fix that. Okay. So 2,800 calories per pound are whole food fats, nuts, seeds, nut butters, and tahini. And I would so much rather, when people want to eat fat, if they would eat it from the whole foods like nuts, seeds, nut butters, and avocados, rather than the processed oils. These are very healthy foods, but I have seen people get in trouble with them because they're also very, very delicious, especially if you eat them roasted and salted. If you're going to eat them, you must eat them raw and unsalted. And then it's a lot easier to moderate them than they are if you go to Costco and buy a 3-pound bag of salted roasted nuts, because you think about sugar, oil, and salt is they're really not food. They're chemicals that we add to the modern food supply that fool our brain satiety mechanisms and cause us to overeat. So it's a lot easier to eat a lot more food when you're oiling it up, salting it up, and sugaring it up. So these foods really, if you're going to consume them, need to be eaten in their raw, natural state. So this is an example of nuts. But again, you have to be mindful. They're very calorically dense. So this is 400 calories of walnuts, and this is 400 calories of potatoes. this is 400 calories or peanut butter, it's not a lot of food. And peanut butter to me is just crack. So I avoid it. I'm just going to turn my fan on because it's a little warm in here. I think it was 106 today, but I didn't have a chance to get out yet. Okay, so just to give you some perspective, I used to be a restaurant pastry chef, and I used to work at the True North Health Center where we followed a plant-exclusive SOS-free diet. And every New Year's Eve, I was allowed to make a raw pecan pie. That's the photo on the left. 2 ingredients only, pecans and dates. It's very delicious. That was a serving size. That was 1/12 of the pie. When we put it into the machine or whatever that is to figure out the calories, that was almost 700 calories and like 55 grams of fat. And that was about 6 bites of food. And patients were asking for another piece. To give you perspective, the plate on the right would be a typical lunch for me. Now, it's not always artichokes. Today it was broccoli, but that's a Hannah yam that weighed about 2 pounds before cooking. I roasted, and those artichokes, or today it was broccoli, that's less calories than that pie. What is going to fill you up more? That's the thing. You can't go around hungry. You know, starch, these foods are to the hunger drive what oxygen is to the breathing drive. You're not going to be satisfied on high calorie food unless you're willing to measure and eat small amounts of it. And most people aren't. And so really, as I mentioned earlier, people are not overweight because they're eating too much food. They're eating too many calories because the foods they're eating don't have the fiber, don't have the water, and they're always going to be driven to overeat on food that is micronutrient deficient because they're always going to be looking for those micronutrients. So that is an example from my real life. I just could not lose weight when I ate nuts. I think people are different. I think women, especially women like me that were obese for over 50 years, once we have fat, it's harder to release. And so even when I was eating a moderate amount of nuts, I could not release the weight until I went to no added fat. I do eat seeds now, but I didn't while I was losing weight. I was afraid to eat potatoes because everybody knows they're fattening. Well, they're 1 calorie per gram. They're not fattening. It's what you put on the potato that's fattening. But now I have an air fryer. I can make crisp fries and make a sugar-free barbecue sauce with tomato paste. And, if potatoes were fattening, then how did Andrew Taylor, the man in Australia, lose 120 pounds in 1 year eating nothing but potatoes? Chris Voigt was the head of the Washington Potato Commission, and he was so upset when the government said people could no longer use food stamps to buy potatoes. He went on an all potato diet for, I believe it was 30 days or 60 days. And he was still eating animal products and oil, and he still got off all his medication for high cholesterol and high triglycerides. So don't be afraid of potatoes. Sweet potatoes, healthier, more delicious in my opinion, but it's a great food. If you look like Curly here, you're eating a few too many nuts. That's what I got to say. I love that. We used to have squirrels where I lived in Sherman Oaks. I sure miss them. Okay, so now nobody needs this next category, guys. Nobody. I don't care if you're vegan or not. Nobody. I don't understand this. This is really a triumph of marketing over science. 4,000 calories per pound. And look at this chart. Remember, 40-fold difference in the calorie density of food. That's going to make a big difference because if you can change the average calorie density of some of the foods you eat by changing some of these food groups, it's going to be really easy to lose weight. 4,000 calories per pound are all oils. Yes, even cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, blessed by the Pope, coconut oil, all oil. Oil is not a food. Oil is for cars. It's not for human consumption. And throughout most of human history, no one ate oil. When I started researching this, oil was used during the Olympic Games in Greece as a prize, and the athletes used to adorn their body with them. It was used in ancient Israel to keep the lamp lit. It wasn't meant for us to be eating and putting in our mouth. It is not a healthy food. Let's just talk about, I'm sure Dr. Montgomery has told you why it's not healthy. Maybe you're familiar with the work of Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr., Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, how oil is atherogenic, diabetogenic, obesogenic, meaning it contributes to heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. It's 4,000 calories per pound. There's no way anybody's going to lose weight on a food that calorically dense, especially because it has no fiber and water. And what makes it hard is restaurant eating, because when you eat at a restaurant, other than Dr. Montgomery's Garden Kitchen, you're going to get oil. Even if you say no oil, you're going to get oil. Because let me tell you, I worked in a restaurant, and when they're making your pasta, for example, that water has been boiling all day with oil and salt. They don't say, oh, they don't want the oil, let me boil some new water for them, like on a cruise. It doesn't happen. There's residual oil on the grill, on the cookware. It is virtually, I must say virtually impossible, because I've been working with some restaurants now. Some restaurants, it's possible. There's one in Austin called Casa de Luz. There's one in Maryland called Green Fair. It is possible, but it's exceedingly difficult to get a true oil-free meal at a restaurant. So
can I ask you one question?
Yeah, sure.
Why is it now that there's oil in everything? Crackers and bread and sauces, and there's just oil in everything.
Because I think the processed food industry knows that the more hyper palatable they can make the food by adding caloric density to it. I'm sure it has to do with also mouthfeel too, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is the processed food industry, if you really want to know the answer to that, there's 3 books that will give you the answer. The End of Overeating by Dr. David Kessler, the former head of the FDA. Salt, Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us by Michael Moss in his new book, Hooked. Because they know that sugar, fat, and salt are addictive separately. But when you put them together, you've got the holy grail of addiction. I call it the evil trinity. And so that's what processed food is, basically, sugar, fat, and salt. And, you weren't meant to activate those pathways at the same time. So one of my mentors used to say, whenever there's a problem, look to nature. You cannot find one food in nature that has sugar and fat, sugar and salt, fat and salt, or sugar, fat, and salt. I mean, breast milk maybe has, but that's a food for a baby. It's not what we're having. But there's no food in nature. We were never meant to have those 3 tastes in our mouth at the same time. But that's what people like. And so what happens is it creates this bliss point, and people like it because it is so addictive. You're supposed to like sugar, fat, and salt for survival, but you're supposed to get your sugar from fruit. You're supposed to get your salt from greens, and you're supposed to get your fat from nuts, seeds, and avocado. You're not supposed to get it from a bottle. Now, if you just look at this jar, I mean, can you believe that's 400 calories? I mean, 1 tablespoon of oil is 140 calories. It has 14 grams of fat. 7 of them are saturated. And by the way, there is no minimum daily requirement for saturated fat. But I mean, for that 140 calories, I mean, I can have 2 pounds of zucchini in my air fryer. I can have pretty much a pound of cherries. It is such a waste of calories, and it doesn't taste good. People think it tastes good. I've had people say, I'm Greek, I'm Mediterranean, I'm Italian, oil's in my blood. But nobody eats oil by itself, right? You're dipping bread into it. How many people really, really drink oil? But this is the other thing. If you're somebody that's struggling with the salt shaker, if you get rid of oil, you can either get rid of or minimize salt, because what oil does is it actually coats it. Have you ever tried to clean up a pan that had oil? I mean, it's so difficult. When you get rid of oil, you not only save all the calories, you not only save your arteries, but you save a lot of money, and it's much easier to clean up, because oil, just like in a pan where it's hard to clean, it actually coats the taste buds of your tongue, which makes it much harder to taste the food, which means you have to use a lot more salt. And the thing about oil is it dissipates when you cook it. So these soup recipes are so ridiculous. It'd say, start by sauteing the onion in a 1/4 cup of oil. You can't tell. I don't do it anymore, but I used to do side-by-side comparisons, and nobody could tell the difference in the soups, or if they said they liked the one better without it. The problem with oil is it slips under the radar, undetected by your mechanisms of satiety, your stretch nutrient calorie receptors. There's no volume in oil because there's no fiber. So in order to feel full on oil, you'd have to eat an unthinkable amount. There's no nutrients in oil. The nutrients were in the plant that it came from. So for example, it takes 16 ears of corn, which I don't think most people could eat, to make 1 tablespoon of corn oil. It takes 44 olives, which maybe somebody could eat, but not if they were unsalted, to make 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And it really harms what's called your endothelial cells. I'm so excited. I just met Dr. Robert Vogel, who did the brachial artery tourniquet test. He's going to come on my show and talk about his work, about how when he fed college subjects, healthy college subjects, bread dipped in olive oil, it constricted their blood flow to the same degree as McDonald's. So it's really, it's a triumph of marketing over science. You don't need it. I can tell you a quick story. My husband is real thin. He's 6 feet tall. And I think when I met him, he was like 160. And then when he became vegan, he got down to like 140. And then we went SOS free, sugar, oil, salt free. But I didn't tell him. This was August 1st, 2008. And so, because I made his breakfast, sent him to lunch, sent him to work with lunch and had a dinner. The thing is, the food didn't taste any different. It actually probably tasted better. So he didn't notice. But about 7 months after stopping oil, he had to go to a bar mitzvah one Saturday, and he tried to put his belt on and he couldn't close it. It was like too big. And he said, do I have cancer? I'm losing. He had lost like 9 pounds. And the thing is if somebody that doesn't need to lose weight, somebody that doesn't want to lose weight, that's basically being experimented on against their knowledge, could lose that much weight just by stopping oil. Imagine how much weight you would lose if you did it on purpose. You don't need oil. Throw it out. It's ridiculous. I mean, I just don't get it. So again, these are our stomachs, and think about it. See, because I need to feel full. I can't be sitting there eating all day and thinking about food. I need to fill my tank and get on with my life. If I do it with oil or, peanut butter or whatever, it's not going to activate any of the mechanisms of satiety. If I do it with animal products, chicken or cheese, well, sure, it's going to feel a little bit fuller than the oil, but look at how much room is left. But if you do left of the red line foods in any combination that you want of fruits and vegetables and beans and grains and sweet potatoes or winter squashes, you can do that 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a day, and you are going to feel full. And guess what? When you feel full, you don't have to keep eating. So now I'm going to talk about why it does make a difference, the amount of fat in your diet, especially if you're trying to lose weight. And if you want to do this more volumetric approach and eat more food. Dr. McDougall's been saying for 40 years, maybe 50 now, that the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And I know for me, that turned out to be true. Protein is 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram. Alcohol, it's almost double the caloric density, 7 calories per gram. I got to tell you, it's not a weight loss food. I know people don't want to hear this, but at least with the women I've worked with, I've never been able to get a woman lean that continues to drink alcohol. It's too calorically dense. It's a liquid calorie. It's a depressant. It slows the metabolism. It doesn't generally give you the ability to make better food choices when you cozy up to the bar and say, give me the steamed kale. It impairs your judgment. Dr. Campbell says, or at least Dr. Tom Campbell says, it's toxic to every cell of the body. It creates cancer to every cell it touches. Now they're saying that it creates even Alzheimer's. That's what the new study out of Britain came out. But the thing is, it's not a health food. And again, why I help people lose weight, really at the end of the day, I want people to get healthy and eat healthy for life. It's not a health food. And but it's just very calorically dense, and it's very hard to lose weight if that's in your diet. Fat is 9 calories per gram, so it's more than double either protein or carbohydrates. Now, there's a concept known as de novo lipogenesis, and this is something called that pigs can do naturally, but human beings really cannot do this. It's the conversion of carbohydrate to fat. And so, of course, in the excess, if you eat an egregious amount of calories, eventually you will be able to turn carbohydrates into fat. But what I mean is, if you're somebody that's an emotional eater and you eat an extra sweet potato, meaning, one that doesn't have oil and fat and butter on it, or if you eat an extra serving of beans, you're not going to store it as fat because we can't readily convert carbohydrate to fat. What happens is, if we eat excess carbohydrate, it either gets released through the top of the head as heat, through the fidget factor, or it's stored in the liver as glycogen, but it is not turned to fat. It takes only 3% of calories. It takes 3% of the calories of dietary fat to be stored as body fat. It takes 30% of the calories in carbohydrate to store it to body fat if we could, but it's very, very difficult for most people to do. Now, this is the fun part of the presentation. A photographer named John Flaherty gave me permission to use these. So, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so basically, these are not calorie comparisons. These are fat comparisons. And it just shows like when you lower the amount of fat in your diet, you can have a greater volume of food. So you can have 1 corn chip or 40 baby carrots for the same amount of fat. You can have a huge tray of vegetables, raw vegetables with a crudité with like a fat-free bean dip, or you can have 1 cracker with a traditional sour cream dip. You can have 10 pounds of cherry tomatoes or a very small amount of a ranch dressing, same amount of fat. You can have 1 chocolate chip or 5 pounds of grapes. And if you take those grapes and freeze them, you can have a delicious confection or make a sorbet out of them. You can have, well, this sandwich characterized by golden arches, it has 25 grams of fat, whereas fruit salad, 12 pounds, has trace amount of fats. And as Dr. Hans Deal says, the more you eat the golden arches, the sooner you'll reach the pearly gates. Or as I like to say, you can't get $1 million figure if you're eating from the dollar menu. A small fun-sized bag of M&Ms has the same amount of fat as 13 apples. If you could eat 13 apples, you could have a huge bowl of vegan chili, or you could have this tiny, tiny 1 or 2 bites of a pizza. Now, you could have 2 spoonfuls of guacamole for about 8 grams of fat, or you can have a huge bowl of salsa with no fat. Now, going back to the idea with the avocado, when I worked at the True North Health Center, I was there for a 5-week job once, and they serve a diet pretty low in fat. And once in a while, though, they'll bring out a tub of guacamole as a topping for whatever the food is. And we hadn't seen guacamole in about 3 weeks. And the dinner plates at the True North Health Center, they're about 11 inches bigger than most home plates because Dr. Goldhammer is trying to encourage his patients to eat as much raw salad and steamed vegetables as possible. And when we saw the guacamole, we went nuts, and we literally filled half our plate with guacamole. I don't want you to be filling half your plate with vegetables, but we filled half the plate with guacamole. And Dr. Goldhammer said at the next lecture, he goes, does anybody know what a serving of guacamole is? And nobody raised their hand. He goes, well, I want you to let you know it's 2 tablespoons. And I said, do you mean like per chip? And he said, no, per day. So if you can get away with that little, it's probably okay, but I can't eat that small amount. I just can't. I want the whole thing. Now, you can have the world's smallest hot fudge sundae or a huge bowl of what we call nice cream, where you take one of the machines like the Ninja Creamy or the Champion Juicer or the Vitamix or the Blendtec or the Onanas, and you freeze your fruit, and you can make this delicious fruit sorbet with fresh fruit, and it's just such a treat. Oop, why is it going that way? Okay.
And I've already hit previous.
There we go. Sorry, I hit the wrong. You could have a huge salad, put some balsamic dressing or some other lower fat dressing, but the minute you put just a little bit of cheese on it, now it's 7 grams of fat. You could have 1 donut, or you can have 70 oranges. Choice is yours. 1 M&M with peanut or 9 strawberries. And if you really have to have a chocolate flavor, I recommend a little chocolate balsamic vinegar that doesn't have any sugar. 1 truffle, 26 oranges. 1 peanut or 3 cups of air pop popcorn. Air pop popcorn is not a weight loss food, guys. It's 1,800 calories per pound. It's got the water removed. And also, I don't recommend hand to mouth foods for most people that struggle with food addiction or overeating. My favorite, you can have 2 regular French fries or 2 huge baked potatoes. And if you have an air fryer, you can make all the French fries you want. Let's see. All right. So just to summarize, the foods in green, these are whole natural foods. They're found in nature. They contain vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients. But most importantly, they contain water and fiber, which together create bulk and increase satiety. The foods in red, to the right of the red line, these are highly processed foods. They're not found in nature. They contain few to no micronutrients and little to no fiber or water, and they contribute very little to satiety. The foods in purple, these are health food foods, but they're very calorically dense. And so I think they're best included in small amounts after your weight loss goals are achieved. So does this plan work? I'll just show you quickly some people. This is me. I actually have these shorts, and I'll show them to you after I take the screen share off. So just show you, there's a saying, inside every fat person is a thin person trying to get out. And apparently Dr. Greger was trying to get out too, because there he is. Okay. So these are just real people that just read my book. That's Angela, Shelley. Oh, I'm going there. Oh, look at that. Works for Guys. That's Tony. That's his wife, Janet. Sandra. I forget this gentleman's name. Will Scott. Oh man. Ex-Marine. He's amazing. That's his wife, Faith. You got to meet them. They're the best. They could be on your show. They have a blog. They raise their kids this way. Philip, it's Janice, Barb, Laura, BJ, Nikki, Tammy. Oh, Shada, my greatest success story. Just write yourself a note, man. Like, she has lost 120 pounds and kept it off 10 years now. As you can see here, in this picture, she's holding a martini, and here she's wearing a bikini. If you want to wear bikini, you cannot drink martini. Want to wear bikini, you cannot drink martini. Just remember that. Okay. And you can see Shada's just rocking it like crazy. She has a YouTube channel now. She's fabulous. Heather lost 300 pounds. I will tell you, full disclosure, she has gained 2 back. And the reason I say that is because if you watch my regular YouTube show, Heather is my guest tomorrow. She struggles. This is a very, very hard thing to do, to lose weight, keep it off, and manage food addictions. But she's still fighting the good fight, and she hasn't given up. But you can
see, gained 2 back.
It's very, yeah, it's heartbreaking because I mean, look at the difference. She was 436. She had lost 300. And she will be on my show tomorrow at 2 talking about her story. And but I still keep it in here because I know it's possible and I know she can do it again. Okay, so there's that. And
where does chicken, fish, and steak fit in that scale?
Yeah, okay. So here, that's a great question. So here's the reason I don't include animal products other than dairy, because dairy is also a processed food on my magnet, is because there is no one number for animal products. You could have game meat, game meat that's very low in fat that could ostensibly be to the left of the red line. And then you could have food that's very high in fat, like salmon or pork, that could be 1,600 calories per pound. Then you can have other meats that are about 7 or 8. And I didn't, first of all, I don't want people eating animal products anyway, but I didn't want to have, I couldn't have one category for animal products, so I didn't put them on. But I will tell you that the average calorie density of animal products is about 1,000 calories per pound. So it's not as bad as oil. Like I said, our ancestors ate it, but it's just going to depend really on the cut of meat, how much fat, right? But most animal products, other than game and possibly eggs, are going to be to the right of the red line. Anyway, so in my opinion, for optimal health, for disease prevention and disease reversal, eat to the left of the red line. And that's my book. And I believe it, Dr. B, look right there. He endorsed it. Oh, let me read what you wrote. This was so many years ago. Dr. B endorsed it, so it's good. This book is a must read for at least 70% of the US population. As a practicing cardiologist, I see many patients with obesity, among many other comorbid conditions that contribute to the progression of their heart disease. I have often said to many of my patients, you don't need a cardiologist, you need a chef. Chef AJ is that chef. The words in this book are from the heart of the chef and are beneficial for the heart of the patient. Isn't that nice? And he made the cover. I did not decide who made the cover, but you made the cover with Neil Barnard and John McDougall and Rich Roll. So congratulations.
Yeah, what an guys I hang out with. Yeah, no, it's good, good group. Good list of guys on the cover there, but you're always in good company. This is excellent. Thank you very much. Let's give a round.
Yeah. I just have a new book. That's it. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Yes. And that's me. If you want to be on my website, I will stop share and I'll just show you that I really did used to wear these pants, these Scooby-Doo shorts. Look how big they are. And then I got a little smaller pair now I can wear.
Wow, that's impressive. This is one note, Green Fair is in Fairfax, Virginia, just if people's out in that part, which is not too far from Maryland. And it's a great topic. This is an excellent topic. And a lot of people are trying to lose weight. And I think it's a very effective, scientifically validated way to lose weight. And I like the way you present it in a very straightforward manner. And I think just using that scale, people can easily make choices. And as you said, the palate can change if you stick with it. And so, you don't have to be held captive by these, processed foods, oils, sugars, and the like. And so, I tell people, anybody can hide, it doesn't take a great chef to hide things in salt, fat, and sugar. And so that's much of what we're getting at restaurants. And when I go to restaurants, I find it difficult to get fresh food. I'm here in Dallas right now with 3 of my kids, and we're doing a send-off for my youngest daughter for college. And so we went to a restaurant, and on the surface you think, oh, it looks kind of healthy, and it had some vegan things in it, but everything's processed. And so the only thing I couldn't order from the menu. I had to select, just say, okay, bring me some spinach and some lettuce and shredded carrots and so on and so forth. And I asked for a vinegar that had white. Basically, I just got lemon juice and as my salad dressing, but it was actually quite good. So, but when you eat out, I'm glad you pointed that out. You really, we tell our people when you're eating at restaurants, for the most part, unless it's a place like Garden Kitchen, you really just have to go to raw plant foods, because everything else is very likely, hit with something processed, and it's really hard to know.
Absolutely. I remember one of my best friend in Maryland, her father was written up in forks over knives because he went vegan and he had kidney cancer. And then all of a sudden he has a heart attack. He goes, but he's vegan. He eats perfectly. Called Dr. Esselstyn. So I did. And Dr. Esselstyn said, first thing he said is, how often does he eat at restaurant? I go, well, he meets his friends every day for lunch. He goes, you can't listen, you can't eat at restaurants if you want to be healthy. You can't.
Yeah, and it's not enough to say I'll have the vegan option. It just doesn't work. I mean, you may as well, it's not enough to say I have the vegan option, and it's really bad. I don't use vegan terminology when I eat out. I just says, okay, put this on my bowl or my plate. You have to be very, very specific on that. Now, if anyone have questions, why don't you raise your hand, and then Jackie, you can look for raise hands.
Can I ask you a question, Chef AJ?
Yeah, of course.
Do any of the people that you help with weight loss, do they ever attend Overeaters Anonymous?
Some do. And, there's, I think the best thing about places like OA is this group support. And I don't mind that particular group as long as they're able to have a food plan that's vegan, because some of these food addiction groups like FA and stuff, yep, not only don't they want people to be vegan, but they insist that they weigh and measure their food. And the problem is if you're eating to the left of the red line and they're telling you to have 7 ounces of vegetables, you're going to starve, right? But sometimes they do, because, if you can get a sponsor that's going to be vegan friendly and that's going to let you eat the quantities of food you can eat, I think that's fine to have that group support. But when they tell you, weigh your vegetables, I mean, who weighs their vegetables? And I remember, I think it was you that said at a conference, like, there's no gazelle on the African savannah that worries about eating an extra blade of grass. I mean, nobody in nature, no species, there's no species in nature that's overweight. It's only human beings, domesticated dogs and domesticated cats, because they're eating processed food.
Yeah. No, if you look in those Wild Kingdom movies and the like, and you're watching animals eat in nature, they don't have scales or measuring cups. They're just eating. And you're right, because they're eating the right food. So if you're eating the right food, you don't have to measure. If you're eating something with poison in it, you have to count it. You have to measure your poison carefully.
Yeah.
So someone asked, let's see, who was that? Oh, Colleen asked, which book would you recommend for a non-chef?
Okay, well, I got them all here. So to be honest, I used to volunteer at the Braille Institute, and most of my recipes were tested on blind students. So I try not to make really hard recipes. Usually one recipe in each book is more complicated. So Own Your Health. What's nice about the new one is if you like pictures, this one has color photos, not every recipe. Let's see if I can show you one. So these are pretty easy and unprocessed. This is the newest book, but we do have some recipes that are higher in fat, cacao nibs, for example. If your goal is weight loss, though, I would say this is the best one, and they all have each one has over 100 recipes. My recipes are not hard, to be honest, because I cook pretty easy. Throw it in the Instant Pot. That's my philosophy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's you're right. It's everyone's feeding into the addiction. It's a socially acceptable addiction, and you just have to fight against it, one person at a time. And I think having programs like this makes a difference. And Lisa, I guess you have to do, maybe you have to get a wood shed in the back and take them out and beat them if they don't comply. Who is that used to beat their patients?
Supposedly, Dr. Walter Kepner used to beat his patients.
That's right.
But you know what, Dr. Frank Sabatino says that food addiction is the only addiction that you can do in public that's actually encouraged.
That's right. It's socially acceptable and encouraged.
It's easily affordable, readily available.
Oh my goodness.
It's really hard. That's why you have to be in a group. Like you mentioned OA. I like people, rather than necessarily to go to a 12-step, to go to a group of like-minded people, right? Because OA is nice in that it'll accept any food plan as long as you have one. But if you could find a tribe of like-minded people, like the people here tonight, I think you might do better if you can find people that are basically on the same page as you.
Yeah. And you have worked with people. I know one of the things that you say is that people should remove all of the bad
Oh my
food
God.
from
Well,
their
that's the number
house.
one problem. Listen, I don't know. Like, I'm a compliant patient. Like when a doctor tells me to do something, I do it, and like Dr. Lyle, like 12 years ago said, you must work harder on your environment than you do yourself. Not a drop, not a morsel, not a crumb of non-compliant food in the house. And I'm like, okay, and I told my husband we can't have chips or nuts in the house. And so first he tried hiding them. Good luck in a 1,000 square foot apartment. And then he said, okay, I'll just take them to work. And, but that's, I think, the biggest problem is people have that lack of social support. I don't mean just with their friends that they go out with, but their own family, their husband, their wife, their kids are not on board and they are not able to stand up to them. Now, if they were alcoholics, would the husband insist on keeping alcohol in the house? I mean, he might, but people don't understand food addiction. That's why I'm doing this free week on Chef AJ Live. It's actually called Food Addiction Recovery Week, where we're talking about that this is an addiction. And if it's an addiction, what works for addictions are abstinence, not moderation.
Yeah.
You can't have it in your house. If it's in your house, it's in your mouth. So if you're going to have it, you have to go out and get it. And you have to have your family go out and get it. And you can't be their pusher and giving them money to get it. And, these people, they're trying to stay on the program, but then they're cooking all this hyper palatable stuff for their husband and kids. How long is that going to work? Nah.
Makes it difficult.
It makes it really hard.
Wow.
You need to bring Goldhammer on next because I'm Goldhammer light. I'm setting the stage. If the people want to hear the real truth, bring him on and he will set you straight, man.
Yeah, we'll put Goldhammer. We had Doug Lyle on in our opening session, but we'll bring Goldhammer on as well. But yeah, I've met and spoken with Doug a lot, and Goldhammer a lot, and he's very good. He's very good. So we'll bring him on. I sometimes I jokingly, tell our patients that, when we put them on the raw detox, and then we call it the grass and water diet, and they say, well, if you're going to get upset with me with the grass and water diet, then I'll send you to Goldhammer. He'll take away the grass. So anyway, but yeah, that's they're a great institution out there. But any other questions? You guys were very attentive, great questions. Chef AJ, it's always a pleasure to work with you. It's always a pleasure to I'm always inspired by your presentation. I always learn a lot. And I really like how you break down the way of losing weight. And what we say is really on board. The juicing and the smoothies, we use it in people who have impaired digestive conditions, if you're on a ventilator and that type of thing. And so, I agree that it's best to eat whole foods, especially have intact teeth and digestive tracts and the like. So, I don't want to make sure that we all understand that we're all really on the same page in these areas. So thanks again. I look forward to being with you on your show, October 2nd.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you.
And we'll let you guys know in the audience when we're on, and we'll be sharing some new information with everybody. But great. Thanks, Jackie and Leah, for helping us put this on. And you all guys have a good night. Any other announcements, Jackie? Am I overlooking anything?
No. But so Thursday we have the heart disease support group Thursday evening. And next month will be Dr. Barbara Taylor. She's a menopause specialist, and Fully Raw Christina.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night, and y'all spread the word. Bring more people to the community. More people need this information. Need to hear from Chef AJ, and we will share the recording of this presentation in the which section will it be in, Jackie?
This will be in Inner Circle replays.
Okay, great. And then and also the chat questions and comments would be there because Chef AJ shared some valuable information. Yes. In the chat, and Leah just confirmed that she saved it, and so we will have this available to you also. So y'all stay. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chef AJ.
Thank you, everyone. Be well. Eat well.